over time, I think a lot of the leadership skills that I've developed have often been products of the environment, so understanding how people need their assistance or need to understand where there's support. I think it's come mostly from environment, more so than actual, someone holding my hand and showing me the way. How can I leverage AI? I've learned firsthand that you've got to look after yourself quite often, and you've got to look after how you're perceived in a workplace, often not just from your manager, but also your manager's manager, and also often the C-suite or the senior executives and how they perceive you. I found that that's often important to have at least an understanding with them, so then if anything should happen, you're at least aware to those other parties and that they know who you are and what value you bring, and being able to deliver your skills in a way where you're setting yourself up for success.
Welcome to Lead the Shift Conversations. This is a space where we ask one simple question: what shaped you? Together, we explore the moments, decisions, and turning points that quietly influence who we become and the work we choose to do. Today, I'm joined by Chale Dodge, a leader in business analysis, organizational transformation, and professional capability development. Throughout his career, Chale has led complex transformation initiatives, but perhaps more importantly, he has become deeply committed to helping other business analysts grow, creating spaces where people can learn, connect, and develop their careers together. Our conversation explores the story behind that work, the experiences, turning points, and decisions that shaped his leadership, what inspired him to invest so deeply in others, and what he's learned about creating meaningful change that extends beyond organizations. This is Lead the Shift Conversations with Chale Dodge. Welcome, Chale, to Lead the Shift Conversations. It's good to have you here with me today.
Glad to be here.
All right. Could you please introduce to the listeners or viewers, introduce yourself, please? Thank you.
Sure. My name is Chale Dodge. I'm the practice lead for Business Analyst Services. We're a BA services consultancy that works across New South Wales, that helps businesses deliver better outcomes. We also work specifically with practices to help BAs at scale solve problems. And often these are unique problems that are not resolvable normally through PMOs or project management practices. They're often unique to business analysis, and we've got a defined approach to deliver that value and to help BAs to do great work. So thank you for having me, Kenny.
Can you please just tell us a bit about your journey and what led you to where you are today and why you do what you do?
Sure. So probably starting 10 or so years ago, I started a BA journey, and it didn't start normally. Like most people who've become BAs, they didn't actually look for the role found them. I was working in a project with a team of 5 of us, and we were just wrapping up on a project, and a manager tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Can you come and have a look at what we're doing over here, and can you help me?" At the time, I didn't know what business analysis was. I didn't know what I could do to add value. And part of that conversation was around understanding what their vendor was doing, understanding what the team was doing, understanding how I could help them, and translating that into actions that would deliver value and being practical in that implementation. So That initial conversation started with a part-time arrangement, which then turned into a full-time arrangement. And then I ended up getting seconded to help two different businesses in the same area who had similar problems. So I was quite lucky in that space. Through my journey with business analysis, I've been involved with IIBA. I've been a certified business analyst professional. I've set up mentoring programs and study groups for the CBAP certifications. I've recently gotten further involved with the different flavors that they've added around data, agile, cyber, and other activities that are going on. I'm exploring how I can add more value to the community. So last year I started asking questions around what do the communities need and what can I do to be of service. So last year I started a group out of Western Sydney region through a large BA community with 200 plus BAs out of Woolworths Group. And from there, I started asking questions around, well, could this scale or could we help more people? That took me to North Sydney with a group there. And North Sydney has about 1,000 BAs in New South Wales Health. So started helping groups of BAs there. And that's led me to, I suppose the assistance with Newcastle, which is where Kenny, as she mentioned, has asked me if I could lean in there. We've got some activities happening in that region at the moment, and happy to lean into that. I think some of the things that I've learned through my BA journey is not just that starting place, but also where I've become as a leader. I'm more interested in being of service. I've progressed from a BA to a senior BA to a lead to a practice lead, and as I've progressed, I've found that there's gaps in sharing of knowledge, gaps in sharing of community, gaps in getting people connected across the sectors. And I think that that's very important to do that. If no one else is doing it, then it's probably good to lean into it. And about 6 months ago, I started a journey going, I think I need to write a book about practices. I need to write a book about what is it that we're missing here and what is it that can help people with what they're doing in a way that's meaningful and useful. And I've seen this link towards AI, and I've asked questions around, well, how can I leverage AI in a way that will help people's understanding, make it solution agnostic, and make it where they can leverage those skills to apply into their work. So I've created a book. It's just gotten released, published on Amazon. I've got a course as well that aligns with that. I'm just meeting with a marketing guy today, and we're going to start releasing the first rounds of that. Back in May, I ran a playbook course, AI playbook course, where I've started to introduce ways of using AI with business analysis without having to type prompts, and also giving people a flavor of how to get to outcomes faster through outputs and deliverables that actually serve the purpose of what they're aiming at and what they're trying to achieve.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, when you first started your career, what was your definition of success versus now? What has changed in that definition?
So I think originally when I started, my definition of success, or at least what I thought, was getting to the ask. If someone says, "Look, can you do this?" I thought when I started, the ask was, okay, get to that point of delivering the ask. They say A, give them A. But as my career has progressed, I've found that when someone asks for A, they're actually asking for B, C, D, and E, but they're actually not asking it. So often I find my first conversation is with people saying, I can understand what it is that you want me to do. Can I just confirm that you don't want me to do these other things, or there's some other things that would actually add value to that? So setting the tone that it's not a one-off conversation, it's a continued dialogue, and being able to deliver your skills in a way where you're setting yourself up for success, but also setting yourself up for further work and activity that delivers value towards an outcome. And when I first started, that's what I thought just answer the question and then move on and wait. So I think I've learned over time that you've got to build the conversation, you've got to build the interactions, and you've got to help your stakeholders lead the way into that transition, because often they won't find it themselves. So if
Yeah.
you help them to find that and help them to understand that, and that you're there to support them, to encourage them, to be like their advocate for what they need to solve, I find that that's very important.
Thank you. I used to think that leadership was more about being in a place of authority or position of authority where you can impact change. My definition is still changing to mean that you don't have to be in a position of authority or have a very senior role to be a leader. You can be a leader within your small niche or within your small group. So, was leadership something that you always aspired to do, or it just fell on your lap?
So okay, so leadership for me. So anytime I get involved in groups, I find I'm a natural connector and a natural bringer of people together. I'm not sure if it's something that came naturally. When I was younger, I read a lot of leadership books and had a lot of
Mhm.
influence around leaders who helped me to develop the art of leadership. And I think a lot of leadership is not about the individual, it's about the service to the other, and understanding when you're leading people, it's not about being up the front and being in charge. It's standing beside your colleagues and looking forward and making sure that we're all looking in the same direction. Some of the stuff that I've done to develop my leadership skills. So I've done a diploma in leadership and management through TAFE, and I've also done a master's in IT leadership. And some of the things I learned through that were different understandings of leadership and what it means for people, like the different theories around leadership, the evolution of leadership through the centuries, and what that actually means. Some of the best leaders that I've learned from today are people like Simon Sinek, Brené
Mm.
Brown, Adam Grant. If anyone's listening to this and does like leaders, I'd invite you to go and find a podcast where the three of these guys are actually having a dialogue. It's very cool, very cool.
Mm. One thing I took from what you said, amongst the many interesting things you've said, is that you intentionally put in the effort to build the leadership skills by reading books on leadership and also taking short courses on leadership. And yeah, that's a very important insight that I would like my listeners and viewers to take away from, at least one thing to take away from this session. So, when you look back over your journey, what shift has most shaped who you are today?
So I think one shift that's changed who I am today. So I think I talked about the BA moving from that transition there. I think in
Yeah.
terms of leading teams, I think when taking that step forward to lead teams, I think something that I've had to be more aware of is when you move from an individual contributor to a team leadership or a team of team leadership. There's always that awareness that you've got to be mindful of others, and you've got to look after your team, your direct reports, but
Yeah.
also you've got to be aware of not just the work of yourselves and your team, but also the awareness of others and other teams and how your work interfaces with them. So I think for me, there's been a lot of learnings around that have been very important as a leader. Quite often people think, oh, as soon as I'm the leader, I'll be able to make decisions. Well,
Mhm.
that's not always the case. Often you become the leader, then you're actually accountable for the decisions, but you're also got to make sure that your decisions don't interfere with other people's decisions, and don't overlay what is going on in your business landscape. So always got to be mindful of that and make sure you interact in a way that delivers value.
Looking back at your journey, was there anyone or any group of people that invested early in your career?
Um, and so, if I was to look back, I think some of the people that have influenced my career, probably so that first early business analysis role and opportunity I had was an ex CIO of Sydney Water. and
Mm,
having that early career development with someone actually coaching me and supporting me actually helped me.
mm,
But I think over time, I think a lot of the leadership skills that I've developed have often been products of the environment, so understanding how people need their assistance or need to understand where there's support. I think it's come mostly from environment,
mm.
more so than actual, someone holding my hand and showing me the way.
We build communities oftentimes because we've seen that there's a gap there and maybe we've needed one ourselves. And that's why oftentimes communities are built. So would you say that was the reason behind you setting up the business analysis community, or it was just a passion?
So, okay, so the business analysis community was actually a concept 4 or 5 years ago that myself and some other leaders actually raised with the community to resolve. And when I've come back into the scene, I've asked questions around, has anyone done any work in the space? And the response was no. I felt obligated to follow through on what I'd originally proposed. So engaging in communities, I think, has helped bridge a lot of gaps in the community. So I think I've talked at length with a lot of people around this that globally we have 2 million business analysts, and in
Mm,
Australia we have 100,000 business analysts. In terms of community, our community is only impacting about 2 to 5,000 of those people. So the question
mm,
I ask is, where's the rest of that community? Where are they getting their information from? And are they supported and connected well to be able to get the results that are needed? And if that answer's no, then I figure out, it's behoving on me as a leader to look back into the community and say, can I be of service? And is there some of my skills that I can share that can help others on their path?
all right, thank you. Looking back at my own journey, I found that major shifts or transformations in my life happened where they were unplanned and where there was, the most uncertainty, fear of the unknown and things like that. Would you say that has been the case with you as well, where you've experienced the major transformations or shifts in your life?
I think some of the things, yeah, okay. So some of the things in life that that we get thrown out. So I think when you end up in companies and then you end up with redundancies, or you end up in companies where your role no longer exists, some org restructure,
Mm.
or things change where the company no longer exists and you end up in a new company. So I've been in those situations. I
Yeah.
think I've learned firsthand that you've got to look after yourself quite often, and you've got to look
Mm.
after how you're perceived in a workplace, often not just from your manager, but also your manager's manager, and also the C-suite or the senior executives and how they perceive you. I found that that's often important to have at least an understanding with them. So then, if anything should happen, you're at least aware to those other
Mm.
parties and that they know who you are and what value you bring. I think over time I've learned different ways of communicating that and communicating that value. I think that's something that is very important when there's those circumstances that do arise where is some uncertainty. So a BA at the moment that I'm engaging with, he's heard that his company is restructuring and they're sending all of the roles to India, but he doesn't know if his role is impacted or if
Mm.
his team is impacted. So he's very nervous about what to do. And when I've reflected on it with him, I've sort of explained, well, where you're at in your career, the amount of time that you've been in this job, and the
Mm.
amount of income that you're going to receive as redundancy, work, that'll come from that time and service. He should be looked after to be able to transition to a new opportunity. So
Yeah.
it's not like he should feel like, oh, I'm all alone and there's no one that's going to help me. He's actually in a good place and he's got the supports needed to help him transition. So, yeah, I think quite often it's those opportunities that actually give us the time to reflect and think
Yeah.
about our contributions and think about how we want to contribute further in future and what we've learned through the experience.
All right. Thank you. Have there been any moments in your career, right, in your career journey where you've prioritized serving others, like you have been doing, over your own career success? And if yes or no, why?
Great question. So I think so when it comes to, it's a great question to ask. So when it comes to
Mm,
leadership, often there's the question of, am I putting myself first or am I putting others first? So I think
mm,
I was helping out a team. This was back at UTS, and I was at the time I was a lead BA there, and they asked me to look at their practice model. And when I looked at their practice model, they actually didn't have a practice model, so I had to build something from the ground up for them. And there was a practice lead there at the time, and what I did was I actually helped them build something that would be sustainable, it would be relevant to their business and relevant to their work, based on BA work and activity of 50 BAs that had come and gone over 5 years. And when I handed that piece of work over, I've handed it over in trust. Everything was in Confluence, everything was documented with live examples, with templates, with tools that they could use like Miro to actually start building from. And when I handed that over, I've sort of gone, okay, I've passed that to the next BAs that are coming through, and I've thought to myself, that's handing it forward. It's not looking after myself, and I've left that behind as part of my legacy. So for me, that was an example where I've looked after others before myself, in that capacity. I suppose that's an example.
yeah, that was a good example. Earlier, you talked about how you took short courses on leadership and you read books and also listen to experts in leadership. So, what other habits help you to continue growing as a leader?
So I think something that I learned. Okay, so something I learned differently from TAFE versus what I learned at when I was studying at university. When I learned things at TAFE, I learned everything through TAFE was through practice. So I'd have opportunities to demonstrate the skill, being able to apply it, then able to experience it. Whereas in university is very different. University, you end up going through a theory, and then you understand the theory, and then you understand the context of that theory and how that applies to others and the research component to it. So when it comes to leadership, that can be a different process to understand that. And even something that I'd like to add too, with the university study, I had to understand a concept called self-reflection, and self reflection required me to think about my experiences over a period of time and think about, okay, what were the projects I was working on? What were the initiatives I was delivering for the community? What was I doing? And how was I interacting with others? And was I successful? Or what did I learn from that experience? And how could I explain what I'd done? How could I explain what I would do better? And how did I interact with others and show up the best way that I could through that experience? So I think each of those experiences in education gave me different approaches and different
Mm,
learnings, and I think that's reflected in my thinking about leadership and how I interact. Often, when I'm talking to some people, I often give them some thoughts and say, okay, so if you were to do this differently, how would you do it, knowing what you know now, and give them time to reflect. But also, if they're facing a current problem, get them to think about where are they, where have they solved something similar to this? What did they do in the past, and was that successful? And if it was, why? And if not, what have they learned that they want to do differently this time? Because that often makes a big difference in their outcomes, in their deliverables or what they're trying to achieve.
You've talked about value that has sort of been recurring in your responses during this session. So, how would you define value? I know value means different things to different people. So, what does value mean to you?
So I think when it comes to my experience with value, I found sometimes the value comes in terms of monetary value for
Mm,
the business and for stakeholders. But sometimes that's not always the case, that you need to solve, some financial puzzle or some financial saving. Often the value comes from solving real problems for people that they can't articulate the problem themselves. So, as an example of value, I was working for UTS and they asked me to look at an ethics management system for them. When I looked at the system, they actually said, "We need a new system, and here's a list of reasons why we think this system's got a problem." And when I've actually looked at it, there was 100 plus items. What I've done is I've mapped each of those problems, and then I've looked at their end-to-end process. I've written their end-to-end process, probably about 60, 70 process steps. I've then mapped each of these pain points to these process steps and then converted those pain points into user stories. And then from those user stories, I've played that to the vendor for them to look at implementing that into their pipeline of work. But then I've gone a step further because their initial problem wasn't just their existing system. They wanted to look at the market to find out if there were alternative tools in the market. So what I've done is I've written full requirements for a full system. We've gone to market with five different vendors, and we've had them propose costings for how much it would cost to implement a new solution for the university and what would be required to do that in terms of budget, timeline, and uh, and all the elements required from that. When we actually assessed it, we realised that it would actually be better to fix the existing system than it would be to implement a brand new system. So
mm.
they initially came to us with initial brief of there's a problem, and they wanted value to have better tools and use it. But on reflection, we found that it was actually better to identify where the problems were in the process, identify what was needed to transition the users to a better story, and to actually work from the existing vendor.
Being a business analyst myself, I understand everything you've just, the example that you've given. But what came to mind now is, the whole idea of systems thinking,
Mm.
seeing the big picture, breaking things down into layers. So now my question, can you, with the example you've given, can you apply it to everyday lives of an individual, like where someone has a complex challenge or situation based on how you've broken down the problem with the organization and things like that? Could you explain to a layman how that can be applied? Because a lot of the things I do or I've learned as a business analyst, I've found that I can apply and I apply it to my everyday life. So, are you able to just explain in layman's terms how people can apply such, strategy in their everyday complex challenges?
Sure. So I used to have a manager years ago, and she used to say that you can use Scrum anywhere, and she described about assigning your tasks with your in progress, uh, sorry, your to do, in progress, and done,
Yeah.
and describing that as a natural flow of tasks and using that as a natural way to understand how business analysis works in the real world. And what she described was that she had three kids, and she had a Kanban board on her fridge, and
Oh,
she'd
wow.
actually get the kids to fill in different parts of, okay, what is it they want to do, what are they doing, and then what have they completed, and she'd work through that in the real world, like in terms of cooking or activities they wanted to do, or things that they needed to do around the house, like chores or things that they need to resolve. So you can take business analysis like Scrum, and you can
Mm.
apply it to a layperson's example. So with chores, with cooking, with activities, um, and you can apply it in the real world. Um, so I think that for me has been the most realistic thing that I've heard.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
the other thing that I've heard is you can use business analysis techniques to evaluate options. So you can end up with, say, you've got a bill or an expense that you've got to pay. You can compare. These days, it's a lot easier with AI tools. you can take your existing bill and you can provide it to your AI tool and say, look, I've got this bill, however it's broken down, electricity, gas, internet, etc., phone, etc. And you can actually say, look, can you get me some comparable providers and see if I'm on the best deal at the moment? And can you provide me with 3 to 5 different options so that I can compare, check that I've got the best deal, or if there's something out there that would actually be better suited, can you provide me something there? So I've done that with some friends, and we found there were things like subscriptions to what do you call it, the streaming services. Was costing them money. We found that they were on expensive internet providers and expensive mobile service providers. So they've saved hundreds of dollars a month from just doing some comparisons and being able to translate that through AI and validating that. So yeah, that's the other real world thing.
I threw you under the bus there, right? With that question.
Yeah, yeah,
All right. Thank you for that explanation.
yeah.
So you talked about technology. So you do a lot of AI training more in the BA space, but I want to bring this more in the general space. My PhD research looked at how organizations can manage the impact of new technologies, of which artificial intelligence is one of those new technologies on, so the impact of new technologies on employees. And one recurring finding was about the fact that a lot of people are nervous, they are afraid because there's that uncertainty that comes with technology, the fear of job loss. So, with your experience and also with teaching AI use and things like
Mm.
that, what skills do you reckon are in demand or will be in high demand, and how can people set themselves up for success?
Great question. So I think AI is one of those things that it's a hot topic at the moment, and a lot of people have got some reserved thoughts about it because they think that AI is going to, take away jobs, or that they're going to do something that humans can't do. Uh,
Mm,
Currently, sitting on the frontier and sitting on the front of stage with I can say categorically, I don't think AI is taking jobs. I think there is a lot of confusion around what AI can do, and there's a need for people who can translate AI into real world use cases.
mm,
I think where there are opportunities where people have said, oh, look, let's remove staff because AI can do it, there's been lessons learned where that's actually not worked. So, like in Australia, we've got Commonwealth Bank, and they tried doing that. And then the next day, they had to bring the staff back again. And there's good examples where AI has been implemented well. So in IKEA, they had it instead of their customer service agents, they
mm,
put in AI to help with customer queries, and they transition those staff to do other roles that
yeah.
were more valuable. So I think AI is here to stay. I think some people are using it badly for excuses for job cuts. And I think that's something that we need to be aware of, that it's not actually AI doing that. It's actually just bad management. And a
Mm,
lot of the stuff that's coming out now is realizing that's what it is. It's just bad management, using AI as an excuse. But working at that cutting edge, so I'll give a live example of how far we are with AI at the moment. You can create an AI agent, which is an autonomous agent. You can create an autonomous agent that can talk to other agents and can set up a series of tasks and series of things to deliver an output. So for me, I've delivered autonomous agents and multi-agent solutions. The trouble with those multi-agent solutions is at the moment we can't trust the quality of the outputs that are being delivered. So for those who are looking at AI, I'd suggest you look at not just the agent solutions, but multi-agent solutions, and think about how that can be practically used in the workplace. So some of the things that I've challenged colleagues and challenged businesses with is, are the old artifacts that we've used, like role descriptions or performance reviews or any artifacts that we use to describe the work, can that be used for an autonomous agent? And I think the tools that we've used in the past do not work. The
mm,
only things that do work are things like process documents, mapping, understanding of the work, understanding where systems interact, understanding those layers. And that work actually sits with the business analyst. So if I was sitting with someone saying, "What career do you think you need and we need in the future?" It's reflective of how many business analysts there are globally. There's 2 million of us, and we're already in there, been doing the work of without AI for decades. And I think business analysts are still going to be relevant because we're now looking at, okay, now we can move faster, now we can move smarter, we can move across systems, we can do this with AI, but you're still going to need a human in the loop to be able to interact between these systems and get clear use cases that can scale and that can work well as these AI systems progress and as they move forward. So I think the role's not going away. I don't think the work's going away. I think just the way that we're looking at the problems are changing. So instead of it being very static, I think it's now going to move to become more dynamic, and it just makes the role more exciting.
I'm going to go back again to your earlier response where you talked about, I think you talked about mentoring or study groups and things like that. How integral is networking and study groups and communities to people who are just starting their career or even whatever stage of your career? How important is it to meet people with like minds and yeah.
So I think if I was to reflect on my networks, so often I have this joke with my business partner about networks because he says, "How do you know all these people? Like, how are you so well connected with all these people?" And a lot of networks are really just look, people who are in the similar boat as you or similar kinds of questions, and you're either solving a problem for someone else or you're actually finding someone who has a need that can be solved by another person. I think that's where networks come in. I think in terms of continuous learning and study groups, if you ever do a course in university, you do a course in university, you're sitting in front of a person who's talking towards you and telling you how it is, or telling you, something from rote from a textbook. That style of learning, while expensive, is not um, is not as useful in the real world as actually
Yeah.
having peer-led education, peer-led communities, and actually learning from others and what's actually going on. I think from university, when I studied, I learned a lot more from my colleagues than I did from the classes, which I found very strange. And then when I reflect in TAFE, there's nobody standing in the podium. You're doing the work, but you're actually doing applied experiences. So I think where I think study groups have the opportunity there, and where I've learned from that, is that study groups help people to connect with each other and also have peer-led discussions around work and how that can be improved. A lot of workplaces don't have opportunities where people can get together and have those safe kind of conversations in their workplace, where it's non-competitive, it's not out looking at the work tasks. It's just colleagues having a chat and conversation about what they're doing and where they're getting stuck. So, from my perspective, I think they're positive. From my reflection on mentoring, when I looked at creating mentoring programs, my initial thought was that how can I help more people to help each other, because they don't know what the other person needs and they
Yeah.
don't know how they can help them, and often the person walking around with a solution doesn't know the person with a problem has a problem unless they meet each other and they ask. So mentoring helps to connect and bridge that gap between someone who has the knowledge and someone who needs the knowledge, and then being able to share that in a way that's meaningful and useful without having to turn it into a long-winded theory-based exercise or an activity where you've actually got to go and apply it. It's more timely and relevant. So each of those cycles, I think, is different in terms of learning for people, in terms of the university versus TAFE versus study groups, and then mentoring. So I think, yeah, very different perspectives.
Okay. Has a no or rejection ever stopped you? Because I'm thinking about how you reached out to people that you don't know on LinkedIn to see
Yeah,
how we could start up the Newcastle community, the VA community.
yeah,
So
yeah.
it's making me think, has there ever been a time that a no or rejection stopped you?
So Yeah, okay. So that's a great question. I think years ago I used to do sales, and rejection was often a no, not now. It's not usually a no, I don't want to do this. It's no, I'm not now. No, I'm not ready. No, I'm not aware. So an example of where that happened to me in the workplace was I was in a team where they were merging teams, and I got asked to fix up the infrastructure for one of the teams and to help replicate that across two other teams. Now I had good rapport with another team, and I just said, "Look, we're going to do this. Are you okay with that?" And I said it verbally, didn't write anything down. They said, "Yeah, we trust you. You just do it." I went to the third team, and they said, "Well, actually, we don't want to do this because we don't know what you're going to do. We don't know what you're going to impact with our systems. We
Mm,
need you to show us in detail your thinking and how you're going to approach it and how it's actually going to make an impact." And when I sat down, did the numbers, checked with vendors and options, and I presented it back to them. And I explained, if they did nothing, this would be the impact, and these other two teams would benefit. And if they came on board, the benefit that they would provide to them through this new vendor, and also the guarantee that I'd support them through the process. When they were more comfortable with that level of support, then I think they were more ready for that yes. So I think that's something I find from experience. Rejection is often no, not now, not so much a no, thanks, but no thanks. Yeah, I think it's just the understanding of people and understanding of what that really means.
Okay, so I've reached out to people on LinkedIn, a lot
Oh,
of people,
yeah.
and they don't just respond. So what would you say about that?
Well, I found LinkedIn. So if you're sending messages on LinkedIn, sometimes some people don't reply because they don't know what they're supposed to reply with. So, and with strangers, I find if you find a common thread and you can connect with them, then it's easier to engage. So I think reason why we had such a high success rate with connecting with BAs in the community for Newcastle was I said, I'm a BA, you're a BA. I actually want to help you do better with working with AI. And it's not just me, there's a group of us who are all coming together. Do you want to come to
Mm,
this community and do you want to join us? And I didn't make it about me.
mm,
When I was talking genuinely, saying, look, I think we're all facing the same problems. And as I've reflected on that conversation with the Newcastle community, I think it's a very common thread that we're all looking at the same thing. But then there's different voices around AI, and there's different perspectives on, is this useful? Is it governed? Is it safe? Is it
mm.
relevant? Is it giving good quality data? That real conversation is often not happening just in the workplace, but it's not happening amongst peer groups. So I think when that conversation took place, I think it was people connected with it. They connected with the story because they saw themselves in it, and I think that made a difference to that conversation. But I think, yeah, for me that was, yeah, that was how that conversation started, and it wasn't my conversation to have. I was really just supporting you, Kenny, in what you wanted to drive for the community and how you saw that there was a need to be of service.
All right, thank you for your response.
Yeah.
So your book is going to be released very soon. Is there a date, or if that's still top secret?
So date for it to be released. Look, I'd love to say very soon, even to the point where it's actually live on the Amazon site at the moment. But I'm not marketing it at the moment because I want to get an author's proof just to check that the pages are lined up, the images are correct,
Mm,
and the cover page is all correct. Because I don't want anyone getting a copy then later complaining to me saying, oh, it's not, it looks a bit funny. So it is live, it is there, it is for sale. So if anyone is finding me after this recording or they're looking, just look to check that I've put up a LinkedIn post and I've said that it's ready. But publicly, you can go and find it on Amazon. It is there under Business Analyst Services, Practice Leadership, Volume One.
okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations on that. What made you decide it was time to write your book?
So I think, great question about what made the right time. So I think when I was, so maybe when I did my master's in, I think it was 22, so maybe 22, 23, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I had this suggestion to my supervisors that I wanted to publish to a paper for this article that we're writing, and I wanted to then lead that into a PhD journey. And when I was writing this paper, it wasn't about business analysis. It was about humanoid robotics and the gaps to
Mhm.
humanoid robotics, and why we don't have humanoids at home, why we don't have them in the workplace, why we don't have them wandering the
Wow.
streets. And when I did that 4 years ago, it's still relevant because there's still gaps and there's issues that are going on. So when I was trying to publish it, it kept getting bounced back and forth. And as part of my own reflection, I started asking questions of my own communities and my own work that I was doing. And I think it was probably about 2 years ago, I did a survey with 90 business analysts asking questions around, are we using the techniques that we think are industry standard that were written 10 years ago? Are we applying them in our workplace, and are we finding them relevant? And a lot of what came back was people were stuck, like they weren't able to apply it, or there weren't development conversations that were helping them progress. So for me, I felt it important to share not only my knowledge, but also to share my experiences of what I've found as a BA in the workplace and as a leader of BAs to help people progress beyond that path and to be able to progress in a path where they can help more people. I think that's what led me to that book. And some of what I found too, I didn't just write the book alone. I found a lady who actually wrote about BA practices probably about 10,
Mhm.
15 years ago. A lot of people don't know her name. Her name is Kitty Haas. A lot of people haven't heard of her before. She's
Wow.
since retired, stopped working. I think what she did was she did such great service to practices that she ended up stopped doing research in that field, and no one continued her baton or continued her journey. So a lot of her writings are known by some BAs, but not all, and a lot of them haven't transitioned that into practice work. So when
Mhm.
I've actually asked her, "Did you ever take your books and turn them into a course? Did you ever look at doing this as a series, or did you think about how you could evolve this beyond that point?" She said, "That's a great idea, Chad. I'd never thought of that. I never thought about how I can educate others and how I can communicate that." And it was some of her reflections where I've sort of gone, okay, could I do something differently? And as well as that, I had a great opportunity to meet with someone who's sitting on the global board of IIBA as well. There's a guy named Russell Mears.
Mhm.
And when I had a conversation with him, in reflection for me, I'm not responsible for lots of business analysts, but he is, and he's got like 100, 200 BAs under his remit. And he explained a really simple approach to business analysis, which I've included in the book, and I can explain it briefly now. He explained this concept that he takes to executives called the bronze, silver, gold approach to deliverables, and they're based on a simple concept of 30, 60, 90-day timeline of deliverables. And it's deliverables that BAs can actually apply straight away. So, what I've included in the book is actual templates that people can use, walk straight out with, and also
Mhm.
playbooks that they can use to apply them and figure out which playbooks they need to run, which level is their initiative at, and what do they need to do to deliver that. So, I've taken not only the knowledge that has come from someone who did this 10, 15 years ago, and it hasn't continued on, but also a leader who's in the space now and how he's advocating for how things can improve. So I've done it a service from where I think um, to communicate what's happened in the past, but also we're talking quite highly about value. The
Yeah.
biggest challenge I've found from BA leaders and even BAs themselves is to understand how value is measured for a business analyst, because quite often value is sometimes described as like a vague concept and something where people don't quite understand. So what I've been able to do is measure value in terms of the contributions that a BA makes. So a BA, for example, using a role description then ends up with a dollar value that's converted into a job, and that's what they use as a metric system. What I've done is been able to convert that into a jobs to be done metric and an understanding of how much value they do. So some funny stories of how I've used this. I did some studies with New South Wales Health, and they had a principal BA role, had no leadership responsibilities. It had website design in there, a whole bunch of things in the job description. When I've thrown it through my AI and looked at the metrics, it's come back and actually shown that this was like a 1 to 3 times value return on this role. So it looked like this role actually didn't add a lot of value. And when I've actually looked, it's not a BA role, it's actually an architect role or a developer role. So the value is actually a lot less in terms of how much they were leveraging it. And I've actually had a tool that's actually helped advocate for, okay, if you want to get higher returns, here's how you change your position description, here's how you change the target of the person, and you actually get better results. And I think that's also this conversation that I've seen with BAs. BAs are often let back because they're stuck in delivery mode and they're stuck with the delivery of someone else's solution or someone else's product, when actually that's not where BAs should live. They should actually be living above the delivery and above the problem, and they should be in that strategy space and actually advocating for what the business needs to navigate and what they need to do. There is a bit of a challenge in the space at the moment where enterprise architects or business architects or even agile experts seem to be taking a lot of space, a lot of airtime that is creating confusion. Even change management too is creating a fair bit of noise, a bit of confusion, and that has not worked to the benefit of the BA. And with those different stakeholders doing that, and the BA is sitting back and having to just get the job done and make sure that there's value actually delivered. But without the BAs actually stepping up and being able to advocate at practice levels or advocate at that strategy level, they're left behind in terms of value and left behind in terms of converting that value for the business. But I'm very passionate about that.
Yeah, I know. What's a lead the shift conversation without my signature question? What does lead the shift mean to you?
So I think leadership for me is about service to the other and being. It's not about being the smartest person in the room and not about being the person who tells everyone what to do. I think it's encouraging and supporting others, being the leader that others say, "Oh, I want to be a leader." Like, so being a role model for others.
Yeah.
And being able to not just say, "Yeah, I've done that," but actually demonstrate that. So demonstrate that leadership, and being able to leverage that to move forward. So I think leadership is about not just about yourself, but about service to the other.
All right. Thank you. If a young professional was listening today, what would you want them to remember?
So if there's one thing that I'd like them to remember, you're not alone on your journey. So something I find a struggle with some BAs is they can get into what I call analysis paralysis, and they can overthink things or they can get themselves into a spin. But I think the acknowledgement that you're not alone on the journey, that you're not alone in your analysis and what you're struggling with, and you should connect with community or connect with others that you want to know more about what they're doing, or you want to connect with them on what you're doing to see if there's different approaches. So if there's one thing, you're not alone, connect to community, and I'm sure the community wants to help you.
Thank you, Chale, for sharing what you've done and the experiences that have shaped who you've become. It's been a privilege having you here in Leadership Conversations. And yeah, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure, Kenny.
Yeah, thank you. Bye. And to all our shift leaders, thank you for watching or listening. If today's conversation resonates with you, I'd encourage you to take a moment to reflect on the experiences that shaped you. Until next time, keep reflecting, keep growing, because the shift starts with you. I'm Dr. Kenny, and I'll see you in the next leadership conversation. Bye.